Vari-Drive adjustment. The Vari-Drive is a mechanically adjusted belt and variable sheave arrangement that provides 35% speed adjustment between the slowest and the fastest speed. The slow setting is just above the critical path of the feeder vibrator head. This system gives you the capability of running from very slow to maximum feeder output, allowing you to work at any point in this speed range that the product lump size and crushability of the product allow. Let's take a moment to look at the adjustment of this mechanism. You need to load the feed hopper completely full to provide a medium point for the feeder drive side belt adjustments. Next, you adjust the pivot table L bracket to tension the feeder drive belts to a normal drive tension. This adjustment is done by loosening the 4 mounting bolts and tensioning with the adjustment screws. The feed table should be horizontal to the feeder's floor. You need to tighten the top adjusting spring on the table to set this position, along with sliding the L base on its 4 bolts. Doing this will provide proper tension. Retighten the mounts. To adjust the feeder limit switch, you start out at full speed position with the feeder drive turned off. Adjust the limit switch to disconnect the forward power at that point. The belt will be 1/2 inch from the top of the sheave. Next, you turn the feeder speed down to its lowest RPM by using the speed range buttons. Adjust the lower limit switch. Note, the feeder is still turned off. All feeders have a critical range within which they will not run smoothly. Never adjust the feeder into the critical path range. You can tell the critical path because the feeder will become very uneven and rough in its cycle. The motor will not move more than 3 inches total. Readjustment will be required because of initial belt stretch. Check daily for the first week of operation. Call CEC Direct if you experience a problem or have a question. There are hundreds of these Vari-Drives running, and they all work extremely well. Safety first is CEC's goal. With this video, CEC wants to remind you of safety first. The following are points you must always consider. Always lock out the power source to the crusher you're working on. First, remove the engine key and put it in the pocket of the man who will be doing the work. Second, lock out the electric switchgear with a padlock and put the key in the pocket of the man doing the work. This procedure will help avoid the chance of a false startup of equipment that could, in turn, injure the worker who is performing the maintenance on the crusher. Never operate a CEC product without first reading the operation and maintenance manuals. Read all the caution and advice labels on your machine prior to operation. The labels are placed on the plant for your protection and for your fellow workers. Inform your fellow workers and all new workers of the safety requirements of the CEC equipment. Never make adjustments to any CEC machine while it's running. This avoids getting clothing caught in moving parts and possibly being pulled into the machine. Never try to remove anything from a crusher while it's running. It's very dangerous. You need to stop the crusher completely and lock out before trying to remove unwanted input items. Review your machine setup. Add safety guards to any area your setup would need to provide a safe work environment for your workers. Safety first is CEC's goal.
In most of your everyday activity, you don't need to think too much about electricity. Generally, you know where to plug in to get power, and you know a few rules to follow. You keep all circuit connections away from conductive material, like water, and you know better than to touch live wires with metal tools, or your hands, or any other material. And in your home, you probably know enough to turn off the power to any circuit on which you may ever need to work. But on many construction sites, there are places where there is extremely high voltage available. High voltage is roughly defined as more than 600 volts. Do you know where those places are on your job site? Do you remember the last time you really noticed a sign that said high voltage? I'm sure I don't have to tell you that where accidents occur involving high voltage, the stakes are extremely high. In fact, even with basic 120 volt circuits, like the kind you have in your home, there is the possibility of electrocution. Crane operators know that one of the primary dangers that they must avoid involves high voltage wires. It may be useful to have the power company mark overhead lines to make them more visible to those working around them. It helps to have a qualified signal person work in tandem with the crane operator, making sure to warn him whenever the boom is approaching the lines. OSHA regulations require there to be an absolute minimum distance of at least 10 feet between the wires and any part of the crane or load. You must use special caution in situations where overhead lines have long spans. These tend to swing laterally, and contact can occur. The same goes for any other piece of equipment, such as a dump truck. One other person should be assigned whose sole responsibility is to watch out for the electrical hazard. Also, when carrying a ladder, use extreme caution to keep away from overhead lines. We've talked about the hazards of contacting a high voltage wire overhead, but cutting a buried electrical cable with a backhoe, for instance, can be as dangerous as impacting an overhead line with a crane. Before you dig, you must contact your underground utility locator service. They'll come out and mark a line on the ground where the underground lines are. They have a 3-foot margin of error, so you should stay at least 5 feet on either side of these lines when you're digging. Of course, we hope that we never have to deal with the dangers involved with high voltage electricity. But in the event that the crane or load makes contact with an energized circuit, don't panic. The fact is, if you've had time to realize what happened, then you're safe where you are. If you're in a truck or a crane, remain inside the cab. Instruct all other personnel to keep away from the machine, rope, or load. The complete machine and even the ground around it will be hot. Try to disengage the contact point. Move the boom away from the line or lower the bed of the truck, whatever it is. Do it on your own without having anyone else approach the machine. If you can't remedy the situation, remain inside the machine until authorities can de-energize the circuit and confirm that conditions are safe. Remember, it may be useful to have the power company mark overhead lines to make them more visible. Keep a safe distance between your equipment and the wires, a minimum of at least 10 feet. Always use inspected and approved equipment. Have the underground utility locator service mark the place to avoid for underground wires. And if you do contact a wire, don't panic. Stay in the cab and try to disengage the contact point. Obviously, we can't demonstrate how powerful and dangerous these high voltage wires can be. And I know that you know that the voltage there is strong enough to kill. So take these few key precautions. Make sure you and your coworkers are safe around high voltage.
Thank you for watching this CEC service video.